Here on CGR Comics, all the way from December of 1985, let's take a look at and review Thundercats issue number 1 from Marvel Comics. Issue number 1 of the Thundercats sold for 65 cents, and this is the collector's item first issue because they proclaim it to be so on top of the comic book. And from their Star Comics line of comics, which also released Air Raiders. As this is the first issue of Thundercats, what they're really doing is just setting the stage and introducing the Thundercats to the comic book line. And here we have Liono, Cheetara, Tygra, Panthro, and the most irritating of all the Thundercats, Snarf. What function does Snarf serve? Seriously, he was worthless. We could have done without Snarf. And these two brats. And then Mumm-Ra. Evil Mumm-Ra. When you open up the comic book, you're greeted with a 1980s paper stock, very thin, rough, like a newspaper quality. The ink is fairly desaturated on here, and the artwork's not bad. Thundercats survival run, and this is really laying out the story of the Thundercats and their arrival to Third Earth. And here we have the individuals that made Thundercats, December 1985, long time ago. This comic is based on the Thundercats TV series, so the cartoon was running by the time this issue was published. And I always liked the Thundercats, but viewed them as a second-rate 1980s cartoon. I mean, the whole concept is so unbelievably ludicrous that it almost works. So we have these half-human, half-cat people from the planet of Thundara that have a title Thundercats, and they're led by Liono, and the members are named Tygra, Cheetara, and Panthro, who all have cat-related names based on panthers, cheetahs, lions, tigers. It's, it's really interesting. The comic starts with a young Liono, and they introduce us to the Sword of Omens. And there's a huge plot loophole in this issue, but we'll get to that in a moment. I forget how to pronounce the name of their elder leader, Yaga, Obi-Wan. He's basically like the Obi-Wan of the Thundercats. So he gets them all their weaponry and their outfits. This should make you want to run out and buy the Thundercats action figures, because this comic is really nothing more than an enormous commercial for the toy line, which is essentially all that these 1980s shows were. Their spaceship is being attacked by enemies from the planet Plundar, Jackalmen and Monkeyians. There's some action here, explosions. We get to meet the bad guys. You should remember them from the TV show. If you don't remember them from the TV show, you're really not missing much. These are not exactly the Cobra or Decepticons of the 1980s. The Thundercats bad guys were pretty stupid. And in fact, the Thundercats kick the living hell out of them in the first encounter. Liono starts off pretty young in the issue, and even though he's too small to actually hold the Sword of Omens, he's still using it to defend his comrades from harm. In fact, he says the sword is swinging him. And after they kick the bad guys off the spaceship, they go and look for a new homeworld. Panthro finds Third Earth. And they're going to go to Third Earth, which is several light years away, so they have to go into hibernation to get there. And this is where we get to the huge plot loophole. And we get an excellent advertisement for He-Man. The legend continues. And there we have Shira, Princess of Power, with special guest appearance by He-Man. The question is, does Teela get jealous? Guess we'll find that out later. Alright, so it's like Aliens or Planet of the Apes. They have to go into hibernation on their long voyage to Earth. They leave their Elder Master to watch over them until he eventually disappears into a Jedi-like thing. Their spaceship lands on Third Earth. All of the capsules open. And amazingly, Liono, coming out of his hibernation chamber, has aged. He's now a full-grown man. So what is he, about 20, 21 years old? He was maybe 10 before he went in there. So it makes sense that all of the other Thundercats have aged too, right? See, he has his little teddy bear he throws away. The bad guys have followed them through space. Now that Liono is fully grown, he fights them off and uses the power of the Sword of Omens to summon the Thundercats with their cool symbol, which was probably the best part of the comic and the cartoon. Let's see. Oh, here we go. Here's the other Thundercats, who come out of their hibernation chambers and have not aged a day, including Wily Kit and Wily Cat, who are still children, yet Liono aged. That's ridiculous. And here we have the ever-seductive Cheetara with Wily Kit and Wily Cat, none of whom have aged a day. And equally amazing is that Liono, who's now a full-grown man, apparently his clothes have aged with him. And maybe the Thundercats just had special clothing that molded to their bodies in a way that it grew with them. At the end of the comic, they introduce Mumm-Ra, who's the main bad guy and protagonist, the enemy of the Thundercats. On the back cover, an advertisement for Care Bears. Now that's just special. I always felt that Care-a-Lot should have been invaded by the Decepticons and crushed. That is Thundercats issue number 1. Should you run out and buy this comic book? Well, probably not unless you're a hardcore Thundercats fan. Unlike the other comics series back in the day based on the toy lines like G.I. Joe and Transformers, and even some of the other ones like He-Man and Air Raiders, I don't think that you're going to get much out of Thundercats that you didn't already get from the TV show. I mean, the Thundercats weren't bad. They were pretty cool. I mean, they had swords and the whole Sword of Omens thing was always cool, and their logo is really great, but the comic falls a little short from the television show. It's a nice trip through memory lane. You're certainly not going to have to pay a lot of money to find this comic book today. And be interesting to see where they take the comic series. Do they do a good job with it like they did with G.I. Joe and Transformers, or does it fall completely flat, full of plot loopholes? I have a feeling that by the time we're done reading some more Thundercats comics and reviewing them, that we'll just all come to the same conclusion that the Sword of Omens should have gone off on its own and become a solo act and done without the rest of the Thundercats.